Democracy is the most acceptable form of governance the world over, and for democracy to thrive in any given society, law and order is a prerequisite, with security of lives and property the hallmark of any viable democracy. Welcome to this special edition of Democracy Now! On Television Nigerian. I am Charles Ibe. Co-hosting with me on this special edition is Mr. Lawrence Audu.
It's a great pleasure to be here.
All right, on this edition, we will be looking at national security in a democracy with a special focus on the fight against insurgency, which has engaged subsequent administrations over the years. How has it been, Mr. Lawrence? Let me just start with you. How has it been?
From 2009, when the crisis began, running up to 2014, towards the end of the last administration, humongous amount of people were killed. And just 2020 alone, I think just about, the figure is less than 500. So I think it's a progress in the right direction.
It's a progress in the right direction, and it keeps getting better as it goes. Now we have a very erudite analyst in the studio who will be tapping on some salient issues on the war against insurgency in the country and the efforts of President Buhari-led administration in tackling insurgency. You will get to meet our guests after this short break. Please stay with us. Welcome back. You are watching Democracy Now! Now, the Boko Haram insurgency, which began more than a decade ago, has been recognized as the most threatening and complex security issue in Nigeria since independence. In response, the federal government of Nigeria has committed itself to different counter-terrorism measures, which are largely dominated by hard politics and military mobilization, spending heavily on defense to upgrade military hardware and train personnel in a counter-terrorism role. Nigeria has also boosted its strategic importance on the global war on terror. However, many think this attempt has become unpopular as it has failed to end the insurgency within a short time frame and has made insufficient headway against unabated terror, with human rights cost among the host communities amidst a surge of stakeholders' discordance. Although so much has been done since the Muhammad Buhari administration came on board, but what are they yearning for? It is not just the sudden end of the insurgency, but a containment of other security issues around the country. Well, in the studio today is a renowned security analyst and international human rights lawyer and a scholar of Middlesex University, London, Philip Agwesi. Welcome to Democracy Now!
Thank you for having me.
Welcome, sir. Now, we'll go straight to the point. Despite reports of military conquests, especially in the northeast region of the country and other parts of the country, there are still pockets of attacks, pockets of violent resistance. Do you think that the government, was a bit too hasty in declaring victory over Boko Haram insurgents?
Well, I want to start by thanking President Muhammad Buhari, our amiable president, for his relentless efforts and decisive leadership to see that we are where we are today. It is still a journey in progress. It is unfortunate that at this time we are still discussing deaths of people in our country. It is quite unfortunate, and for every concerned person, it is a thing for alarm. Having said that, I want to strongly anchor my appreciation for what Mr. President has done, not on the general belief that we are actually coming from a very bad and sorry situation, but because of even the deliberate sabotage by fellow Nigerians to see that the efforts of the government does not see the light of the day. The war against insurgency in Nigeria and the rest of the world is a very complex and complicated issue. So many countries started this war before us. We just had our situation about 2009, 2010, and with no training on ground for our armed forces, with no right equipment on ground, we have been able to see our military rise from ground zero to this point where they are today. We've seen tremendous improvement in strategies, in tactics, and even in terms of defense budgeting and spending. Just yesterday, the past administration was involved in all manner of shady deals and transactions in terms of defense budget and spending. We saw the situation where the aircraft departed this country with about $50 million. Nobody ever saw it, landed in another country. That money was seized, still in South Africa. We haven't seen that money. But today we can see, a wave of fresh air, a wave of transparency in how these things are being tackled. And that is what gives us hope that in the nearest future, if we continue in this direction, we'll be able to address this issue of insurgency totally. Coming back to your question, to say if it was right for the federal government to have declared Boko Haram defeated, and I want to be very loud and clear about it, that yes, if you study the indices on ground, there was a time in this country the insurgency was not only in the northeast, it was a national insurgency because we had the insurgents even planning to set up a base in Okene. The north central was already occupied by they are taking over Suleja, Zuba, and even, there was even a time that one of the terrorists was arrested in faraway Boko, somewhere in Benue State, where they were making efforts to move into the southern part of the country. We understood that the cell in Boko was to cause havoc in the south and in the southeast, while Okene was majorly to focus on Lagos, be the commercial net center of the country. And all these things have been addressed. They've not only been moved out of this national space, they've not only been moved out of the northeast, they've now been restricted to the fringes of the Lake Chad basin. And even at that, we also know that the federal government, through the state actors, are doing all within their power to ensure that even that is stopped. So I want to give it to them that with these milestones achieved so far, we can safely say we have won over the enemies.
All right, much you've mentioned about the efforts of the military, the theater of war, all of that. You've raised a lot of issues about tactics the military has been putting up and the results achieved so far, but it appears to be lost on the population. Would you say the information about the activities of the soldiers in the theater of war is actually being handled well? Or would you say the media is actually underreporting the security sector?
Well, as a matter of fact, before now, the armed forces were nobody's friends. It was very difficult for the ordinary civilian to relate properly with these people. And like I mentioned earlier, when it comes to insurgency, it's a hydra-headed problem. It has many faces, it has intricacies. And as a matter of fact, many of us, public intellectuals, we have not actually added the needed vibe to support the military. The political class has equally failed, in rendering some of this support. The insurgency, like some of the top players rightly mentioned some time ago, that these things are being done by Nigerians. They are people like us. And these things have continued because many Nigerians have not, particularly the stakeholders within the theater of operation, they have not really given the needed support to the military to be able to achieve their total goal. We've seen the media, times without number, even aiding and abetting the activities of terrorist organizations. How do they do this? Either by error of commission or omission. Sometimes media organizations are fast to report stories that in the first instance did not even take place. And sometimes they give these insurgents the idea, as to what will grieve the society. Because, for instance, when the pastor in Madagali was kidnapped, the media had speculated more than 4 days to the day the man was killed that the man was being beheaded. So we sometimes we give impetus to these criminal elements to hit us where it hits us the most. Then other stakeholders, like international non-governmental organizations, they've equally not really helped, because these people, they pay ransom to the terrorists who take this money at the end of the day to procure arms from the black market, and they use these arms to engage our troops. But in terms of strategy and tactics by the military, which of course we must appreciate them and thank them equally for what they have done. For instance, we used to have a situation before where these guys appear from nowhere, they attack military bases, they clear all our soldiers, so many soldiers are killed and all of that. That has become impossible for the insurgents to achieve. So lately, they resorted to planting mines, on ways, known to be, even for members of the public. And that was because the issue of suicide bombing has been defeated. The military has been able to devise counter-terrorism measures that have been able to address the issue of suicide bombing. And now we have this issue of landmines being planted. And to also thank the military, because in recent times, I think they have also decoded the strategy used in planting these landmines, and the insurgents can no longer get them. Not just getting the military, the insurgents can no longer get all of us. It's just for few locations where, isolated places where people go to their farms to carry out their normal activities, and these people run into the bush to kidnap them and try to generate international attention to the activities. We know within this country, to a very large extent, that they have been decimated and they can no longer do the kind of harm they used to do.
Throughout the nation, nobody will find, nothing will happen. We hope so.
We can do anything. We are ready to die for our right.
Don't fight, don't be anything. Just go and watch, stay and wait for the result.
Thanks for staying tuned. It is still Democracy Now, and our guest, Chief Agbese, is still in the studio. Now, sir, security receives a sizable chunk of our budgets, subsequent budgets over the years, and still it appears there are still a lot of inadequacies when it comes to procurement of arms for our soldiers, because sometimes we hear about insurgents having more sophisticated weapons than our armies and all of that, even though they are not confirmed stories. But it's out there and it's making rounds a lot of people are going around with the stories. And then there's the issue of welfare. We have reports of soldiers not feeling okay, and let me just put it that way. We have a sort of reports of soldiers deserting and all of that, some soldiers abdicating from their responsibilities. Now, is there a remote possibility that there might be an internal sabotage? And an internal sabotage about, especially when it comes to the monies that come to security from our budgets, national budgets on a yearly.
Well, you've asked one question with so many questions, and I want to deal with them one after the other. One, in terms of improvement in defense budget or increase in budgetary allocation to defense. First and foremost, between 1999 and 2015, not much was done in terms of empowering the military with the needed equipment. So between that time and 2015, we had lots of obsolete equipment, that were no longer in use in other developed countries. And I think it was about 2015 that the Nigerian government at that time saw the need to equip the military. Unfortunately, part of that money became what we now know as Dasuki Gate. And we all know how these monies were spent, used for the 2015 general election. Some people are still in court over that money, or the EFCC is still recovering part of the money. And these monies that have been stolen, of course, we already know that they were not used to procure any equipment. Having said that, it is not possible for the insurgents to have better equipment than our troops. We have been to the theater of war. We have seen the insurgents display some of their best equipment. Sometimes maybe machine guns stolen from the military, they hang them and they try to parade that sophistication, but they don't have it, and we must not give it to them. It is a segment of the media that has magnified the insurgents. Is a segment of the media that has attempted to equate a ragtag person who, is not fighting with any military training or any military fatigue. You see the way they dress, they try to copy the military, but they can never look like our military. And that exactly tells you who they are. Then in terms of transparency in what is being spent by the military, we must give it to the current leadership, the service chiefs. They've really tried. They've brought sanity into the system. And for us to know what exactly is going on in the theater of operation, what the commanders are doing, we have to use the mirror of the leadership of the military to be able to get exactly what we are looking for. I am not saying that the military is a collection of angels. No, I will never dare to say that. But to a very large extent, I think there is a high level of transparency in the military than many other sectors in the country. And international organizations have come to attest to this. Transparency International in the last 3 years has given it to our military that yes, they've been able to weaponize transparency in procurement and spending in the military. And if we agree that it is a journey in progress, then we'll get there, where we'll have probably 99.9% level of transparency. But to a large extent, I know very well, with the initiatives that the service chiefs have brought on board, we have seen clearly that yes, today we have a military that we can be proud of in terms of transparency.
Okay, now talking about the service chiefs, that brings me to this question. Despite the fact that the president and commander-in-chief seem to be excited, to be okay to a very large extent with Nigeria service chiefs, some stakeholders, especially some in the National Assembly and in the opposition, think that the service chiefs have not done enough and they should go. And as a matter of fact, this is, a clearly a division that we are seeing. Don't you think this is going to hamper the war on insurgency?
Yes. This notion, actually, that the service chiefs have not done well, they should be replaced, is an old story. But because this question is coming from Television Nigeria, and I understand that a lot of Nigerians count on what you people report to them, I'll just take a few minutes to discuss that. What quarters is this call coming from? It is coming from the very people who want to sabotage the effort of Mr. President. Forget about whatever robe they are dressed in, that they try, to hide their innermost motive. The innermost motive of these individuals is for Mr. President to fail. These service chiefs who came on board to do this beautiful work and are being applauded by international actors, reasonable Nigerians, are the very people that another segment want us to sack. So the question now is going to be not the message, but about the messenger. What have these people done for this country in the last 10 years? Most of these persons who are in the National Assembly were holding one executive power or the other just yesterday. How many youths did they take out of the street? They were there yesterday. They had a golden opportunity to empower our youth so that the insurgents will not have people to recruit. They failed to do that. Today, they are out. They've become choristers. They've made a new song which they love so much. It is so much sonorous. But truth be told, I do not subscribe to even the minority notion by some persons that people who have failed should be allowed to repeat a class. In this case, this war against insurgency is a very complicated issue, and at every step, we have seen that the current service chiefs, they have been able to dissect the issues. They've been able to address them within a short period of time. Come on. Between 2011 and 2015, we were in this country 4 years. It took 4 or 5 different sets of service chiefs. Not a single set of these persons were able to address the question of bombing in Abuja. Abuja was still being bombed until 2015, July, when these people came on board. It took them less than 6 months to be able to decode and find a solution to bombings in Abuja. It took them another 6 months again to be able to decode and find a solution to the insurgency in the Northeast. It took them another 6 months again to be able to confine the insurgents to Sambisa Forest. It took them less than 90 days for them to invade Sambisa Forest. So what are we talking about? Are we now saying that we should change our first 11 and bring in these people in the National Assembly? But I think the major issue is that because of our political nature and our lack of patriotism as citizens, whether low or big citizens, is that we do not know the borderline between national security, national issue, things that are of importance to individuals. So, because of that, the political class, when they are in the National Assembly, they see themselves more as members of their political parties. They see themselves as members of their ethnic groupings. So to that extent, they are not able to remove that speck to see the real issues. And that is why sometimes when they speak from these high places, you get disappointed because people that you know, people that you expect better from, begin to talk, like kindergarten children. And that is why none of them has been able. The other day I was reading the Sun newspaper. I saw comments made by Senator Uche Ekunife, a woman of substance. She wrote in that document that she has studied the British Parliament, she has studied other parliaments in the world, how those countries are fighting insurgency, and how the parliaments in those countries are helping to support the armed forces. So today, I challenge members of our National Assembly to tell us what studies they have carried out about America, to give us the studies that they have carried out, how China is protecting its sovereignty, and let them lecture us on the role of the parliament in national security. So the badadash that they come every day to tell us that these people are not capable, they are incompetent, they should be sacked, I think we have gone past that stage. Mr. President has made a clear statement that these people, they are doing their best and he expects them to do better. And as a matter of fact, these are people whose best has earned us superlative deliveries and performances. So are we now going to reverse the gains that we have made by bringing on board people who will be schooled by us? Are you saying that if we bring a new set of service chiefs, the political class who have abandoned the fight against insurgency will now repent and begin to support the armed forces? Let them give us a guarantee what we need to do as citizens of this country for them to recommit themselves to the war against insurgency. Just yesterday in this country, we were here when Mr. President presented a supplementary budget request to the National Assembly for the purpose of arming the military. It was turned down. We all saw that yesterday. 90% of persons in that parliament are the very people who are still in this parliament. Abaribe is still there. The current Senate President was the majority leader of that assembly. And so many of them, they're just same people, just a few new faces. The same people who rejected this budgetary allocation yesterday are the people there today. Ali Ndume is still there. So what are we talking about? We want to see what the parliament can do to support the war against insurgency. And if we experiment that for the next 2 years, and we see that they have given enough support, I think that time Nigerians will begin to listen to their suggestions on how we can collectively fight. So,
well, with this current arrangement as it is now, with this discord between the National Assembly and the security forces, so to speak, doesn't it pose a problem to oversight of the democratic oversight of the military, because they need to oversight most of all these things that they do?
And that is why I mentioned Senator Uche Ekunife earlier. The highest oversight that our parliamentarians have ever carried out is flying from Abuja to Maiduguri. None of them has ever attempted to take his oversight to Sambisa Forest. None of them has ever attempted to take their oversight to Goza. You are talking about people who have even abandoned their constituents, people who were voted by these very people from this community and have refused to go home. We can't even ask them to go back and talk to the people. Don't you think, in my opinion, I strongly think that if representative of the people, voted by the people, serving the interests of the people, will go back, particularly in Borno State, to meet with the people and talk to the people, they will be able to engage the people. And when they begin to engage the people, it's going to drastically reduce the insurgency. Some of these people who are fighting, from testimonies we have gotten from some of these guys who surrendered, is the fact that they have been neglected for too long by their representatives. They have not seen the presence of government anywhere. So the only group they see are the insurgents. And when they see the insurgents, they are readily available because they offer them food, stolen food to eat. They have no source of livelihood deep down. And I want to pass a note to His Excellency the Governor of Borno State. If he decides to engage the youth of Borno State and get them gainfully employed, engage them in useful ventures, I can tell you that 50% of the remnants of insurgency within the Chad Basin will be reduced.
All right. Well, on this frame of thought, we've seen issues of non-state actors coming up to play in the security sector. We've seen vigilantes. We've seen recently we had a talk about Motekun, some regional security, and just recently we heard the president marking out some amounts of money for the state police. Now, isn't it a tactical endorsement of the notion that perhaps the national security architecture have failed to provide security for the people?
No, I beg to disagree with that. There is a wide gap between community policing and community police. But that is not a topic for today. But I want to tell you that some of these ethnic militias that, sometimes political leaders groom and develop into security outfits are even responsible for the problems that we are facing in this country today. Because when they arm these young boys in the community, it becomes very difficult after they have been abandoned to retrieve the arms from them. So before these things will metamorphosize into security organizations, be recognized by the state, they first of all take into armed robbery and kidnapping. A very good example is my state, where I come from. The notorious terrorist who has been after everybody in the state, Mr. Tewasi Akwaza, popularly known as Ghana. Ghana was somebody that was recognized by the state, was funded by the state. And when he had his disagreement with the state, he moved into the forest, from where he plans attacks on innocent citizens. And caution must be taken when we're talking about Amoteku, because unlike the military that is a conventional force, you train people, you know what time for people to retire, you know where a soldier is found at every point in time. When you give somebody arm and you call him Amoteku, and without close supervision, when 2 or 3 of them decide to go into the bush or stand at the express at night, that becomes armed robbery. And during the day, the same Amoteku will tell you that they are trying to fetch out the criminal element in the society. So these are things we must be very, very careful about. But in terms of community policy, which the federal government has released resources, community policy is about community relations between the conventional police and the community intelligence gathering. And I strongly believe that if the process is duly implemented in the right way, it is going to complement the effort of the conventional security agencies.
Thank you so much.
Okay, well, while we wind down, we want to take you quickly to Mali. We know it may not be a topic for this meeting, but of course, Nigeria, plays a very strategic role in the West African sub-region, and we know how much we have committed troops, equipment, and resources into the fight, especially in the Sahel region. Recently, Mali was taken over by some renegade soldiers who were through the government. Now, there's a school of thought that with the increasing involvement of the military in politics, even during elections in Nigeria, is going to create a leeway for military takeover in some instances. Do you have this fear?
Well, with the current set of service chiefs, from what we have seen and what we have heard and read, I don't see that negative situation here. A good example was when Mr. President was ill, was on medical vacation abroad. The Chief of Army Staff came out clearly to tell Nigerians, to warn his troops, to warn his officers and soldiers that there was an intelligence report that political actors were trying to, instigate the military into negative actions. He came out clearly as the leader of the army to warn the soldiers, and we had peace. And after that time again, during the 2019 general election, we learned that part of the plans of the opposition was to truncate the democratic process through the use of the military. And the leadership was able to keep tab on every soldier, on every officer, to ensure that there was a very peaceful democratic transition from one regime to another regime. And the democratic process took place peacefully and amicably. And I think Mali and the rest of West Africa, they have a lesson to learn from the Nigerian Armed Forces. Continue to remain apolitical as necessary as possible. The military should only participate in any activity as directed and delegated. I think what happened in Mali was outside the delegation of the then Commander-in-Chief of Mali when the soldiers seized the Commander-in-Chief. That was wrong. And that has to do with the level of involvement of the armed forces in Mali in Malian politics. In the case of Nigeria, our military are happy. They are always in the barrack, only come out when we invite them. They are out fighting insurgency because of the areas where the Nigerian police force need their support. And outside that, we don't find them anywhere. So if other West African countries and the rest of Africans can, educate their military to behave the way our military is behaving, I'm very, very sure we will have peace all over Africa.
Thank you so very much. Your final thought on this. Now, democracy is all about the people. And for democracy to thrive, there must be peace. And for peace to reign, there must be security. I want your final word to people, especially the citizens of Nigeria, especially on how they look at those people that are saddled with the responsibility of providing security, protecting their lives and property, or a need for change of orientation.
Well, we will continue to talk to our people, our stakeholders, those of us that go to church. We talk to our people in the church to respect constituted authority, because even the Holy Book admonishes us to appreciate people for their sacrifices and efforts. For many of us who go to mosques regularly, we also talk to our people in the mosques. For those who are practitioners of other religious beliefs and stakeholders even in the market, we must continue to talk to our people. Members of the armed forces are not spirits, they are not angels, they are human beings like us. They have their families, they have children, they have mothers, and they also deserve to live. So creating unnecessary tension in the polity so that we can invite them to come on board is not the best. What is really the best is for every one of us to see ourselves as stakeholders in the peace project of the country.
Thank you so very much. We've been talking with Chief Philip Agbese. He's a security expert, and he has been giving us all we need to know, on a need-to-know basis, all about security when it comes to the fight against insurgency. And that's the much we can take on this special edition of Democracy Now! Remember that security is everybody's business, and we owe it as an obligation to support the security agencies, helping to keep our lives and property safe. Also remember to subscribe, like, and share Television Nigerian programs on all our social media platforms. Thanks for watching. I am Charles Ibu.